Welcome to TSN Racing School, where there's no such thing as stupid questions, only ones that'll help you get your license. Today we got a racing analyst, Tim Hauraney. Man's a former race car driver, which is exactly why we got a lot of questions for you.
I have answers, I think.
All right, well, let's open it up. What is porpoising, and why have I heard that word so much in 2022?
Yeah, porpoising is actually a term that was coined back in 1979 by Mario Andretti. Essentially, what's happening with these 2022 regulations, downforce is being created from underneath the race car. And if we think of a race car as creating downforce, the car is actually getting sucked down to the ground as it's going faster. But what's happening is that some of these cars are just getting too close to the pavement and touching, and that's choking off the air that's used to help create this downforce. And once the air gets choked off, the car pops back up, and then it starts creating downforce again. It gets back down to the ground and then chokes off the air and pops back up. So thus meaning porpoising of the car going up and down.
Once we fix this bouncing, we're going to be right there in the race.
Last year, Lewis's magic button kind of weighed into the championship in the end there.
Did I have magic on? Yeah, but...
What is Lewis's magic button, and why does he even need that to begin with?
That's a great question. The magic button that's used on the steering wheel is essentially migrating brake bias to the front tires so it can warm the tires up to an optimal temperature where the tires are going to get the most grip when the driver turns into the corner. Now, the magic button is only really used during formation laps, during virtual safety cars, and safety cars because the tires are starting to lose a lot of their heat.
I could have sworn I turned it off.
For the last time, what is DRS, and actually, are there any downsides to it?
DRS is the drag reduction system, and yes, there is a downside. If you're using DRS and turning into a corner, that's a huge downside because you're probably going to go off and crash the car. For DRS, essentially, when the car is going in a straight line, the rear wing sort of holds it back a bit, so creates drag. What happens is when the rear wing pops open, a lot of the air that's coming over and through the car is allowed to leave through the back wing a little bit easier. It speeds the car up and makes it go a little bit faster. Drivers use it in qualifying, but most importantly, they use it in the race when battling with other cars. It's usually used on a very long stretch of road.
Definitely don't want to end up in a wall. Thank you. So why do cars have oversteer or understeer?
Well, a lot of it comes down to the physics, really. Also, it's balance within the race car as well. What type of balance the race car driver likes. You factor in tires with all that as well. Basically, the car is just not gripping the track properly. Understeer is front push, or when you're turning into the corner, you're aiming for the apex, and the car doesn't want to go towards the apex. This is called understeer, front push, plowing, whatever you want to call it. For oversteer, you can have turn-in oversteer, you can have mid-corner oversteer, you can have exit oversteer, and it's essentially when the rear of the car gets loose, there's not a lot of grip there, and it's really dancing around and you're trying to correct it. With this regulation change that we've had, so these new cars for 2022, there's a lot of grip happening at the rear of the car, so a lot of these cars are actually really understeering for these drivers. There's so much grip being done at the rear of the car, there's not a ton of grip to go around at the front.
What do you think the most difficult car on the grid would be to drive?
The most difficult car on the grid to drive, I would say the Williams is pretty difficult to drive. Just looking at the onboard cameras from Alex Albon or Nicholas Latifi, I mean, it's really fast in a straight line, but once the car is starting to deal with high downforce, very fast corners, there's just not enough downforce being put onto this race car, and essentially, that's where they're losing a ton of their time.
You put Max in that car, you think he's getting to the top of the grid with that?
No, I don't think Max Verstappen's taking the Williams to the front of the grid, no.
And finally, just for my own personal notes, Tim, if we put you in the Ferrari today, your qualifying times is still decent?
If Ferrari really wants to let me drive their F175, I will do it, but let's make sure there's a ton of runoff.
No, I didn't. I am so sorry to the whole team.